Welcome to LifeConfessions TV. Try to relax and feel the story.
My name is Emily Carter, and 2 years ago, I fell in love with a man who told me he was just a high school teacher. If someone had told me then that nothing about our story was what it seemed, I probably would have laughed. Because Daniel Brooks looked like the most ordinary man in the world. We met on a rainy Thursday evening at a small bookstore cafe in Portland, Oregon. I had just finished a long shift at the marketing firm where I worked, and all I wanted was coffee and silence. The cafe was almost empty except for one man sitting near the window with a stack of papers and a red pen. He looked frustrated. At one point, he rubbed his forehead and sighed so loudly that I looked up from my laptop. Our eyes met. He smiled awkwardly.
Sorry, he said.
Grading essays. I swear teenagers are trying to kill me slowly. I laughed. You're a teacher? English, he said. High school. That was Daniel Brooks. A tired teacher with messy brown hair, a wrinkled button-down shirt, and coffee stains on his sleeve. Nothing about him looked impressive, but he had kind eyes. And when he smiled, something about it made you feel calm. We started talking. First about books, then about work, then about everything. He told me he had been teaching for 8 years. He lived in a small rented apartment across town. He drove a 10-year-old Honda that barely started in winter. His life sounded simple, very simple. And honestly, that's what I liked about him. Because the world I lived in wasn't simple at all. I worked for a competitive marketing agency where everyone cared about titles, money, promotions, and appearances. My coworkers dated lawyers, tech founders, and finance guys. Every conversation somehow turned into a competition. So meeting Daniel felt like stepping into a completely different world. He didn't talk about money. He didn't try to impress me. He asked questions. Real questions. What made you choose marketing? What kind of life do you want in 10 years? What makes you actually happy? We talked for almost 2 hours that night. When the cafe closed, he walked me to my car. Before I got in, he said something that made me smile. Can I take you to dinner sometime? Somewhere cheap. Teacher's salary, remember? I laughed. Cheap is fine. That was our first date. And for the next 2 years, Daniel Brooks was the most normal boyfriend anyone could imagine. Daniel really did live like a teacher. His apartment was small, 1 bedroom, old furniture, books everywhere. The kitchen table had scratches all over it, and the couch was so worn that the fabric had faded. But it felt warm, comfortable, real. On Friday nights, we usually cooked pasta together, or ordered pizza. Sometimes we watched movies. Sometimes we sat on the balcony and talked for hours. He never tried to impress me with expensive restaurants or gifts. In fact, the most expensive thing he ever bought me was a $40 necklace from a little art market downtown. But it meant more to me than anything, because he listened. One time I mentioned that my grandmother used to wear a silver necklace shaped like a small leaf. 2 weeks later, he found one that looked almost identical. When he gave it to me, he said, "You talked about it once." Just once. He remembered. That was Daniel. Attentive.
Calm. Kind.
My friends liked him too. At first, they were skeptical. When they heard he was a teacher, they made the usual comments. "Emily, you could do better. Don't you want someone more ambitious?" But when they actually met him, their opinions changed. Daniel had this quiet confidence that people trusted immediately. He wasn't flashy, but he was intelligent and thoughtful. My best friend Rachel once said something interesting after meeting him. "There's something about him," she told me. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," she said slowly. "He feels important somehow." I laughed. "He's an English teacher." "Yeah," she said. "I know, but still." I didn't think much about it at the time, because Daniel never acted like anything special. In fact, if anything, he acted almost careful. He never talked much about his family. He said his parents lived in another state. He visited them occasionally, but he didn't show many photos. And he never invited me to meet them. Whenever I asked, he would say something like, "Soon. They're complicated." I assumed it was normal family drama. Everyone has that. But there were a few small moments that didn't quite fit the image of a struggling teacher. like the time we walked past a luxury car dealership. Daniel stopped for a moment and looked at one of the cars, a black Mercedes S-Class. I joked, thinking about upgrading from a Honda? He smiled slightly.
No.
I had one once. I laughed. Sure you did. But he didn't laugh back. He just said quietly, life changes. Then we kept walking. Another time we were at a restaurant and the waiter accidentally spilled water on our table. Before the manager could even come over, Daniel calmly handled the situation. Not in an angry way, but with a kind of authority that made the entire staff immediately respond. After we left, I joked again. You handled that like a CEO. He smiled. Maybe I missed my calling. I thought it was just a joke, but looking back now, those little moments meant something. I just didn't understand them yet. The first real crack in Daniel's story appeared almost 2 years after we met. It was a Saturday morning. I was at his apartment making coffee while he was in the shower. His phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Normally, I never touched his phone, but the screen lit up and something caught my eye. The notification read, "Board meeting, Monday 9 a.m. I frowned. Board meeting? For a high school teacher? I picked up the phone. Another notification appeared. An email preview. Quarterly financial report attached. Now I was confused. Teachers don't get financial reports. My curiosity got the better of me. I opened the email, and what I saw made absolutely no sense. The email header read, Brooks Educational Technologies, Executive Board attached, was a report showing numbers. Huge numbers. Revenue, investments, acquisitions, millions of dollars.
My heart started beating faster.
What was this? Before I could read further, Daniel walked into the kitchen. His hair was still wet from the shower.
He saw the phone in my hand.
And for the first time in 2 years, I saw something I had never seen in his eyes.
Panic.
What are you doing? He asked quietly. I held up the phone. What is Brooks Educational Technologies? For a few seconds, he didn't say anything. Then he slowly sat down across from me. The kitchen suddenly felt very small. I was going to tell you, he said. When? He took a deep breath. Soon. I crossed my arms. Daniel, why are you getting financial reports with millions of dollars on them? He looked at the floor. Then he looked back at me. And finally, he said the sentence that changed everything. I own that company. I blinked.
What?
I founded it. My brain struggled to process the words. You're a high school teacher. Yes. And you own a company making millions of dollars? Yes. I stared at him. You're joking. I'm not. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I said the only thing that made sense. Why would you lie about something like that? Daniel leaned back in his chair, and the calm teacher I thought I knew suddenly looked different. More serious, more powerful. Because, he said quietly, I needed to know if you loved me for me. At first I thought I was dreaming. Daniel Brooks, the quiet teacher with the old Honda and cheap apartment, was now telling me he owned a company worth millions. I laughed nervously. This is ridiculous. I understand why you think that, he said calmly. So prove it. He nodded. Okay. He stood up, walked to the bedroom, and came back with a laptop. Within seconds, he opened a website. The homepage showed a professional logo. Brooks Educational Technologies. Below, it was a headline, Innovating the Future of Digital Learning. He clicked another page. Photos appeared. Corporate offices, employees, conference stages. And then one photo stopped my breath. Daniel, wearing a suit, standing behind a podium. The caption read, Daniel Brooks, founder and CEO. My mouth went dry. How long?
7 years, he said.
But you told me you've been teaching for 8. I have. That confused me even more. You're doing both? Yes. I stared at the screen again. How much is the company worth? Daniel hesitated. Then he answered, about $40 million. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath my feet.
$40 million.
You've been pretending to be a struggling teacher for 2 years? I whispered, I am a teacher, but you're also a multimillionaire. He nodded slowly. I didn't know whether to be angry, shocked, or impressed.
Why?
I asked again, and this time his answer was different. Because it wasn't about testing me, it was about his past. When I was 26, he said quietly, my company suddenly became successful. At first it felt amazing. People treated me like I was important. But after a while I realized something.
What? I asked.
Everyone was pretending. He leaned forward. Women who had never looked at me before suddenly wanted to date me. Business partners acted friendly only when they needed money. Even some relatives started calling me again. His voice was calm, but I could hear the bitterness behind it. So 2 years ago, I made a decision. What decision? I wanted to know what a real relationship felt like. I stared at him. So, you created a fake life? Not fake, he said. Just simpler. You rented a small apartment. You drove an old car. You told people you were a teacher. I kept teaching because I actually love it. Then he looked directly at me. And then I met you. The room was silent. My emotions were tangled together in ways I didn't understand. Part of me felt betrayed. 2 years of dating someone who had hidden something this big. But another part of me understood why he did it. Money changes everything. People behave differently when they know someone is rich. Still, you should have told me sooner, I said quietly. I know. So, why didn't you? Daniel hesitated again. Then he said something that surprised me. Because I was afraid. Afraid of what? That the moment you knew, everything would change. I looked at him carefully. You really think I care about your money? No, he said quickly. That's not what I mean. Then what? He sighed. Emily, once people know who you are, they treat you differently.
How?
They stop being honest. They start calculating. They start wondering what they can gain. And I didn't want that between us. I leaned back in the chair. The truth was, I understood exactly what he meant. I worked in marketing. I saw how people changed around money and status every day. But still, Daniel, I said slowly, you let me believe you were struggling. I know. You let me pay for dinner sometimes because you said teachers don't make much money. I know. You let me worry about helping you fix your car. He smiled faintly. That Honda actually did need repairs. Despite everything, I laughed. The tension in the room softened. But one question still bothered me. So, what happens now? I asked. Daniel looked at me carefully. That depends on you. What do you mean? I was planning to tell you soon anyway. But now that you know, he paused. You can decide if you still want this. I frowned. What do you mean? You might feel like I manipulated you. You might not trust me anymore. And if that's the case, I'll understand. For a moment, I studied his face. For the first time since we met, he looked uncertain, vulnerable. And suddenly, I realized something important. Daniel hadn't pretended to be someone else. The teacher version of him was still real. The quiet man who cooked pasta with me. The guy who remembered my grandmother's necklace. The one who listened. That was all real. The only difference was he also happened to own a company worth $40 million. I stood up, walked around the table, and wrapped my arms around him. You idiot, I said softly. He looked confused. What? You could have just told me. He laughed quietly.
Yeah.
But for the record, I added, I'm still mad. Fair, but I'm not leaving. And for the first time that morning, Daniel looked relieved. 2 months later, I saw Daniel's other life for the first time. His company headquarters was located in Seattle, a modern glass building with several floors of offices. When we walked in, something immediately changed. Employees greeted him with respect. Executives asked for quick decisions. Assistants followed him with schedules and reports. It was surreal watching the same man who graded essays in coffee shops suddenly running an entire company. At one point, Rachel whispered to me, "You weren't kidding." I smiled. Nope. But the biggest surprise came during the board meeting. Daniel introduced me to the leadership team. And afterward, one of the executives said something interesting. You know, he told me, Daniel talks about you a lot. I raised an eyebrow. Really?
Yeah.
What does he say? The man smiled. That you're the only person who treated him like a normal human being. Later that evening, Daniel and I sat on the rooftop terrace of the building. The Seattle skyline glowed in the distance. You know what's funny?
I said. What?
If I had known you were a millionaire when we met, he looked curious. What would you have done? I probably would have assumed you were arrogant. He laughed. That would have been unfortunate. Very. Then he took my hand. And now, I said, smiling, I know you're just a nerdy English teacher who accidentally built a $40 million company. He laughed again. And in that moment, I realized something. Daniel never really lied about who he was. He just hid one part of his life. The rest of him had been real from the very beginning. And honestly, that was the part that mattered. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel for more real-life confessions and unexpected twists.